I'd like to talk about data, and I'm going to talk about data science and education, but I'm going to turn the tables a little bit. Right now, when we hear about data science and we hear the word education, we typically think about some pretty exciting things that can be done, like use student data to personalize and adapt curriculum, to recognize facial expressions, to help us identify and respond to patterns or clusters of online learning behaviors. So that's typically what we think about when we hear data science and education. But the way I want to turn the tables on data science and education is that instead of having data science be the tool that figures out what learners are doing, is to instead have the learners figure out what the data science is doing. And my proposal is that we keep making headway on these cool tools and applications of data science and the algorithms that are developed, but we also invest the time in finding new ways to make data more intuitive to students. So in a sense, what I'm proposing is we transform learning by taking on the work of training the next generation of data scientists. Now, why should we do this? As Dan had said, data are inundating the way we live, work, and play. We are producing right now petabytes of data every day. When we snap a selfie, or we talk to our voice assistants, or shop at the grocery store, data is basically becoming our societal bloodstream. And if I were to stick with this kind of body systems bloodstream metaphor, we would definitely want to train doctors who can help make sure that all the data is working the way that we want. But it's not just going to be a need for data doctors. We're going to be better off when everyone can do their part to help us maintain good data health and data hygiene. Because now data could, and perhaps it even should, play a bigger role in shaping the kinds of decisions that we're making. But that involves making sure that we have a really broad base of understanding about how data are used and knowing how to work with it. And so that means transforming learning. So it involves better tools to help people develop data literacy, because we want people to think well with data, and we want them to think critically, and we want them to think statistically. But that last part, thinking statistically, that's hard. Why is it so difficult for us to think statistically? We easily think associatively, we think metaphorically, we think causally, but statistics requires thinking about many things at once, which is just something that our intuition is not designed to do. That's from Danny Kahneman, Nobel laureate in economics. He's part of this previous generation of cognitive scientists and cognitive science research, lots of it that had come out of Stanford, that established we really struggle with statistical thinking. And that means we really struggle to develop data literacy. So what do we do next? Push more people to take stats class? If it's going to be like my experience, and I do have a math degree, more statistics instruction is not going to be a cure-all. And we could try rebranding stats class as data science class, but that's probably going to just attract the people who are already drawn to that topic. It's not going to bring in the throngs of students and give them the seat at the table necessarily either. What we need to do is we need to think about different ways of teaching about data. Would it help to have more class options in schools? Sure. But we need some fresh approaches to make data feel more intuitive, not less. And so this is where this entire work of this Transforming Learning Accelerator that's bringing in learning sciences and design fields, and where that can all come in. We do the work here of combining the science of cognition with the expertise we have about social interactions and technology and design, and use that to transform learning across contexts. I'm going to talk today about schools, but there's a lot that we do outside of schools. We bring in the entire toolkit, the combination of qualitative, descriptive data, quantitative research, computational and analytics style methods, find out what works, partner with educators in the messiness of the real world instead of the coziness of our laboratories, and spend time kind of looking both inside and outside of current educational systems to find solutions that work. So let's go with that last point. Look inside and outside of the current systems. With the pandemic, it's become pretty apparent to all of us with school-age kids that school serves some pretty important roles in our lives and our communities. There are people working right now in our school systems who have been going double time, nonstop for the past year to provide what students and families in our communities need. And we should absolutely respect and appreciate that. There is a lot of good work that's happening because of the frontline workers in our education system. But at the same time, There's value in being curious, as Nick Haber had illustrated, but there's value in being curious and trying new things. See an interesting idea that exists somewhere else that's not school, and wondering, exploring what might that look like if we gave it an education bent. And this is where I want to focus with my remaining time. I want us to look at what's been called the quantified self movement. Many of you, some of you have maybe heard of it, but if you haven't, what is it? It's the integration of numbers and data into our everyday activities. It's the idea that data made by us can also be for us. So like if you look at your wrist, you might see a Fitbit or a smartwatch, and that's the quantified self just sitting there on the back of your hand. You look around your home, you might see it in Internet of Things technologies, smart thermostats and smart meters that keep track of your energy usage. If you use Spotify, you'll see it in your yearly music report. This is just one of the ways in which data are becoming part of our everyday lives. And my question is, what if we could use this quantified self movement for learning? So I've largely focused on, in my work, wearable devices and activity tracking tools that are part of this modern age of what we described as techno-athleticism. We use digital technology to keep track of our step counts, get reports on our running speed, and monitor our heart rates. The idea is that by moving around, we're producing our own big data. So what if instead of having this big data approach where the data that we produce goes to some company where they have people crunching the numbers and technologies, making recommendations, and get to a situation where the users make the data and we give the data right back to them. And if we could take advantage of how familiar and personally relevant those data are, could we devise some interesting new ways for people to learn data science? So this is something that I've worked for the past several years with the support of the National Science Foundation and my colleagues to make happen in the classroom with elementary and middle school age kids. What we do is we provide new ways for students to capture and visualize their own data. So we turn their everyday lives into statistical learning laboratories. And using that approach, we help students make new insights about statistical ideas that are basically that core of data science. So here are some examples. Top left, a student looking at a data visualization of step count data made by her entire class when they use their footsteps to measure the length of their playground. In this gesture analysis here, I've talked about in some writings how this particular girl goes on to explain how all the different segments in this statistical distribution work and talk about what it is that the students in her class did that made this bell curve shape appear. That's something that actually a lot of college students struggle with, explaining sort of why the bell curve looks the way that it does. But based on a video analysis of a middle school student, this youth did it. These middle images, we produce big data from our wearables, provide it with students. You get a lot of big data about their movements throughout the day. So here's a Tableau visualization of student movement activity across 5 days of the week, Monday through Friday. And we showed representations like this to students, and they can see this and pick out immediately where's recess, where was PE, where's the part where they sat around for language arts, and they can tell this whole story about that entire data set. And one of the things we really want people to be able to do with data now is use data to tell stories or to find stories inside of data. And when it's their own data, they can. The middle right here is a student designed comparison project where this fifth grader compared how her teacher's Fitbit performed compared to her teacher's smartphone step counting app. And she found out that there are some actually pretty big discrepancies between those two technologies. So we might have a future QA tester on our hands. And then the bottom two panels was from a project where a class of students were wondering if that feeling of having to do more work to walk uphill, if that actually involved taking more steps than going downhill, where you have that easy sort of momentum pushing you down feeling. So they went ahead and used Fitbits to obtain data. This is their comparison uphill to downhill. And yeah, there was a small difference. So given the opportunity to work with their own data, I found time and again that students, elementary, middle school, they can come up with some pretty interesting things to investigate, and they get much more comfortable with thinking about and through data along the way. We've run some comparison studies on student statistical reasoning when they follow the current data instruction that's provided in schools. That's shown in the white bars in the graph here to the right. And when they do quantified self-style approach to using data, so that's over here in the gray bars. And the really short version is things look pretty good for a quantified self approach. We interview teachers both before, during, and after they do quantified self-style instruction. And we keep finding they have really positive things to say. Here's a quote on the left from a teacher we'll call Ms. H. She taught a 5th and 6th grade combo class, and she volunteered for us what she noticed that happened with one of her students. She said, well, Olivia, she really struggled with math last year, did not enjoy it, was often confused. And with quantified self, she became one of my most engaged students, often volunteering, often raising her hand with insights and explaining to other students. And she was one of the ones that was super excited about the way data was going for her, and she gained a lot of confidence. So this is the sort of thing that if you saw what Joe Bowler was talking about, that we can make happen with students when we give them this quantified self data. It's encouraging. This idea, give students back their data and use that to learn data concepts. Interesting things can happen. I've talked a lot about elementary and middle school. That's where I spent most of my research and design time, but I've done some stuff with high school age students, set up informal quantified self experiences that are similar to these online based meetups that the quantified self community practices. These students get access to new wearable Internet of Things technologies, and start to design questions and projects. And we look at what it is they ask and figure out when they have this data nearby. One student we worked with looked at how her tracked sleep correlated with her mood the next morning. And it turned out that the amount of sleep she got did not end up looking very predictive about how she felt when she woke up. I've done a small collaboration with a fellow in England who's documented how students can come up with some pretty interesting visualizations of their own data. So this heart with the lines coming out of it shows moods and intensities done by a high school student. So overall, I think we are getting some really good evidence that interesting things can happen if we give kids rich data experiences and if we help them work from their own data whenever possible. And to summarize all of this, this quantified self approach to teaching and learning, it has some potential. It could offer something a bit different, perhaps a little more accessible. And why do we want to help students with data? Well, it's going to be good if data is more accessible, but there's this longer end game that we'll need to keep in mind. Next generation needs to not only be able to read data, but understand how data are useful and used with technology. I think Emma Brunskill will be describing some of that later. But why are we so hyped about data and data science right now? It's because we can do interesting things with data when we use machine learning. And then this can help inform and be part of the artificial intelligence technologies that are getting all the buzz right now. So I have a Google Ngram here on the bottom right. And you can see that the terms data science, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, they're all riding the same wave moving upward since 2010. And what we want to do is, get students to understand how data fit into artificial intelligence, not just make this something that only computer science students who study it in college find out about, but something that all students throughout K-12 can have access to. It's already becoming part of their daily lives, and they need to know about what's happening under the hood there. So if we can channel some of our energies and talents to helping the next generation get a bit more data savvy and be prepared to improve how it is we use data in our world, whether that's personal decision-making or the next generation of AI technologies, then I think we're going to stand a pretty good chance of transforming learning with data. Thank you.